Okay, so I see Marshall on screen. Good morning, Marshall. How are you doing today?
I'm super well, Francisco. It's always a good day when I'm here with you talking race cars and friends.
Excellent. And you have some very special guests today, correct?
Well, I have one confirmed, and that is the amazing Tony Parella. I also have our cat Rocky in the background who may join us, but he was not invited, but that's just fine. But yes, we have one of the great folks who's brought so much to the sport since he came into our world. Tony Parella, Trans Am, SVRA, open wheel cars, he circuses. I don't. What else is he doing? Is he going to the moon? SpaceX? He does it all. But luckily, yeah, we got Tony Parella here.
Beautiful. Good morning, Tony. So you guys are on for the next 30 minutes. So thank you for joining us, and it's on to you, Marshall.
Tony, it's always a good day when you start off the week with you and your insights about what's going on in the world of Parella Race Holdings, all the various series that you have going on, your speed tour, which is really taking off. We've got this fun little jamboree going on this weekend in my neck of the woods, the track formerly known as Sonoma Raceway, but something deep in our hearts, better known as Sears Point, where from the mid 80s on, the moment I got a driver's license, I was heading to Sears Point and down to Laguna Seca to see Trans Am. Tell me about what we have coming this weekend with this Western swing for you and your series.
Well, you know, first of all, Marshall, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on today. This is a milestone for us. Something that, you know, I set out to do 9 years ago was try to get every what I call tier 1 road course in the country on our footprint, and then fill in the blanks with either Trans Am or SVRA, or now FRA and F4. But what was neat was we had Sonoma for a while, and then we weren't at Sonoma. And then I got Laguna, and now we finally have Laguna and Sonoma, and they're back to back. And the big deal about that, I don't know if anybody's ever pulled that off before, you can finally make, starting on the East Coast, going to the West Coast makes sense, because you get two marquee tracks in California with one toe. It was the concept behind it. And so we kick off Sonoma with our, quote, West Coast Trans Am and an SVRA event. And then we're off for a couple of days, and we test on Thursday and back racing Friday through Sunday with SVRA and Trans Am. And the Laguna race will be the national show of Trans Am. So both the Trans Am, both events, even though the West Coast event is Sonoma, that's over 30 cars, or in fact, I think we have 31 as of this morning.
Wow.
And I think we're going to hit 60 Trans Am cars for the national show. So I'm really excited to see where we are. I mean, it's kind of checking one of the boxes that I had sketched out a long time ago, that if you don't have both of those tracks on your schedule, obviously you're leaving something on the table in California. So to have them both and to have them back to back is really a privilege.
Let's talk about the wider world that you've developed as well, Tony. So coming in, your SVRA, your vintage event, that's the thing that most folks came to know you in terms of quality offerings, a lot of fun, some innovation and variety as well with the V-Rock races and such, right? So SVRA is really where you planted your stake in the ground, added Trans Am to that. We have open wheel, right, with the Formula Regional Americas, this association with the SCCA. It's a lot going on here. Can you just share for those who know you for vintage racing and maybe Trans Am only, that, hey, indeed, there's a lot more that you have going on now?
Well, it's really been a fun evolution, frankly, of SVRA. When I came in 9 years ago, it was SVRA only, and people don't realize we only ran 3 events when I bought the company in 2012.
Wow.
It was Sebring, Watkins, in Mid-Ohio. So here we are this year, we're running 17 events, and we didn't have Indy this year because of COVID. So, we will be back to 18 events in 2022. I plan to be back in Indy. Hopefully, the way things look, we will be. And it's really evolved because it's what started out as just SVRA, and the scheme was, well, all right, I'm going to build vintage racing to a national scale and have, frankly, bucket list tracks for people who want to go experience it. And that was my first exposure to SVRA. I grew up near Watkins Glen, and I got to drive from Texas to Watkins and actually race where I watched my first Trans Am race. That was a big deal to me. And so that concept is really what the foundation of SVRA was. But when you looked at the economics of vintage racing, to do the footprint that we had, it would have been tough sledding if I didn't have some other pieces, parts. So Trans Am was a brand I knew and loved and grew up with, and it, in a sense, needed propping up a little bit to get back to the scale it once was. And John and I worked together in the early years of SVRA at a couple of events, and it really started to go. And I could see. I made an investment into Trans Am, and now it's a major part of our show. And then, of course, FR and F4, what that gives us is a young demographic. And I'm excited to have the ladder system of if a kid can win an FR or kid can win an F4, they got the chance to go to IndyCar, or they got the chance to go to Formula One or some other direction to be a professional racer. So we got these young kids, 15-year-olds, and I got some gray beards on the other end of the spectrum and everywhere in between. And it's, our scale is really amazing. It's been fun to, when you think about having 5,000 entries in the season, it's attracted some household brands for sponsors, and the whole boat has risen as a result of not just one piece, but all the collective pieces. It's, the old adage, 1 + 1 actually equals 3 instead of 2 by putting the parts together. I'm sorry.
Before we take a deeper dive, Tony, into this weekend and Trans Am awesomeness, let's stay on kind of the wider company angle for just a moment and talk about another development or two that I think is pretty important coming into 2021. That's launching your own app for folks who want to follow along and see it all. And where I think this is important for you and your company, as you well know, most major racing series are betrothed to the best deal they can get with a network partner. Those deals aren't always the best, though. And so I love how you've taken control of this and said, well, we want to make sure anybody and everybody can get what we're offering if they can't make it to the race weekends themselves. Tell me about that. And also the sponsor side you mentioned about the platform to grow and add. Feels like I see a press release every day about a new corporate partner joining your group, but it seems like the app and the sponsorship growth might be tied a little bit hand in hand.
They are, Marshall. The truth of the matter is when we started, the goal was to become part of mainstream motorsports in America. And at that time, technology wasn't what it is today. I didn't really see live streaming as the answer. I like a lot of people, thought network TV would be the way to go. The problem is to get live network TV is so cost prohibitive that vintage racing couldn't do it on its own. And frankly, Trans Am couldn't do it on its own. So the best we could do with Trans Am was do tape delay, which I don't personally believe there's a lot of value in tape delay of races. And frankly, we couldn't quantify number of people viewing. We were doing it on cable. As long story short, as technology has changed, we decided that live streaming was within our reach, and we launched it. And the beauty part about live streaming, it's a worldwide deal. Anybody can can access it. We've now commercialized it where we have two ways you can see it. One, if you want to watch it live, you can watch for a whole weekend, SVRA, Trans Am, everything we have on the Speed Tour weekend for $9.95 for the weekend. Or you can buy seasons pass for $59.95 and include our Speed Tour magazine. But if folks who don't want to spend the money, it's no big deal. We do we stream it later on social media at no charge a week later. So the folks who want to watch it live, help us pay for it. And what's happened is it's directly changed our sponsorship format. I'm seeing household names come to us that are more consumer brand oriented than race or luxury brand. We've gone through an evolution as a company. When we started, it was race related brands. So the Sunoco's, the Hoosiers, the Parella, anybody who, Lucas Oil, anybody who came to us because of our scale of entries, it made sense for a race related brand to be a sponsor. Then when they saw who our competitors were a wealthy demographic at the SVRA level, certainly, we started getting luxury brands like, Marathon Coach, Jaguar, Land Rover, etc., NetJets. But now with streaming, WeatherTech has come to the table, Avis has come to the table. You're seeing household names, Mission Foods has come to the table because our scale and reach, our numbers are competitive with some of the biggest names in racing as far as reach and social media and impressions. So we have a right to be at that table for the first time. So this has all been a work in progress, but I'm really excited to see how far we've come with the sponsorship side. As you mentioned, it's not quite every day, but we've had our fair share of growth, and I see that continuing, frankly.
I think I see John Clagett coming through the Zoom time machine. What a wonderful inclusion here. Bit of a surprise guest. John, perfect for you to take the baton in the conversation here, talking about Trans Am and its reboot. So whether it's through the app, going to an event and seeing it live, reading about it on eraser.com, there's some great content that we can get with this modern day Trans Am series. Tell folks, though, who maybe enjoy what they have today, it was a little bit dusty and needing of maybe a full chassis restoration to get it to where it was. And you've been a central figure in making Trans Am a strong property again. Tell us about that.
Well, I could probably talk about it for a very long time, but the shortened opportunity there is to really talk about 2011, when the ownership group really had to be put together or Trans Am was going to die. SECA had made it clear that they didn't have the money to keep building the brand with all the other requirements they had to run the club or pro racing's division. So an ownership group was spearheaded by Jim Durhog at that point. It was central to guys in the paddock that needed to have Trans Am alive to basically support their own racing. And then the best phone call I ever made was in 2012 after we had already started operating, but I made a call to Tony saying, do you see an opportunity to put modern day Trans Am with your organization, because you have a group that has vintage Trans Am in it, and what do you think of the idea of a vintage / modern day Trans Am component to your weekends? Thank goodness he said, yeah, I see the value of that. Because then in 2013, we started with 3 races that were combos, including Sebring, which the whole reason I called Tony was that he had invested in signature events. signature circuits that, when I looked at them, meant something to a Trans Am competitor, like a Sebring. So we started off with 3, and then Tony started kind of liking what we were all about, started asking if he could be considered to be part of the ownership group. And that took 3 years to actually get him in. August 2016 is when the ownership group invited Tony to join. They saw the value of all of the pieces that he had started to put in place at the SVRA level, which, of all the operators I've ever worked with, and I would say that's a lot, that over the course of time, I had never seen anybody committed to building an event model from the ground up. And I was a victim of that, or susceptible to that myself, when we had all kart races or champ car races. I could sit there and talk about how wonderful our numbers were, but I wasn't doing any of the heavy lifting that created the value. And in Tony world, that all changed, where Tony and I have built this event model, but it's mostly Tony, that gives us our own ability to control our destiny. And it's taken every race that we do in a repeat year to year, there's growth from the year before. And it's because Tony has this event marketing thing figured out how to do it. And so we're no longer controlled by the destiny of what was kart or what was champ car, or if we only have good numbers because there's a NASCAR race. Those are no longer the things that drive our ability to have a great marketing platform.
Let's talk, John, and stay here on Trans Am about the classes that you have developed, some which are long-standing, but some that are also, I would say, in reaction to the market's evolution and need, right? Your customers will tell you, or those outside your organization will tell you, hey, me and some friends, we have this type of car. We sure would love to have a place to use it. You guys have responded where there's been value in that. You've also taken a step, pretty significant step too, on the infrastructure side, just talking, say, race control, race director level as well. You guys are swinging for the fences here. Tell me about the class evolution, and also, say, a David Hoots joining you all from NASCAR. Those are big moves.
Yeah, so class configurations. The Trans Am class is the one, where your prototype tube frame, silhouette body, 850 horsepower with no driver aids, right? And you talk to the Boris Seds of the world, they say this is Chris Dyson currently, both of those guys. There is no other motorsport property that has gone backwards with driver aids. So this is true, authentic sports car racing as it always was. And nothing has really, truly changed about the Trans Am class from a engineering point of view since the Bob Riley configurations of the 1980s. When you really get down to it, the engineering model is very similar. Sure, there's been new updates and shocks and springs and getting better life out of 850 horses, but the real investment was made by Kerry Hitt to modernize our body works, where he spent probably $1 million of his own money to give us contemporary looking bodies starting in 2013 and 14. So we got the Vet, then we got the Cadillac, then we got the Mustang, then the Challenger, and all of that has brought Trans Am class to look modern. All right, then TA2 is really just an amazing success story. You might say dumb luck, where from the very beginning, though, we had the opportunity to put in place the price caps and the small group of constructors that we were going to allow, engine certification programs that we controlled. And it has led to this amazing thing that it is. 38 cars are scheduled to be at Laguna Seca in 10 days time, which is that's pretty remarkable. Where it's come for guys like Rafa Matos, Indy 500 Rookies of the Year, to the NASCAR kids, to SVRA guys that see that this is just a great platform on a cost value. Throw it all together, and it's attracted top tier sports car racers like Mike Skeen. And then you put it all on the racetrack, and it really is an amazing looking class.
You know, John, the other thing that I love about TA2 is I was speaking with a friend here locally in the Bay Area who doesn't race in Trans Am, saw the value in TA2 and was telling me, yeah, we've agreed we need to get a TA2 car, and we're not really planning on doing the rest of the calendar or driving out. You know, we're more amateur based, but when they come to town, we want to have something that we can bring and go racing in TA2. Another thing that's really important about what you guys have done with Trans Am and its refurbishment is it was a series for decades where you might not have all full season competitors in each race, because you'd have the locals who were able to plug in and be part of things. You guys have created that opportunity to come back as well. You don't see that a lot at a IndyCar, NASCAR, whatever race, of the locals having both the right equipment that fits the rules and the ability to participate.
Yeah, and that's where being part of the SCCA family has its value. You know, all of our classes, and we haven't touched on the production classes yet, but all of them have an amateur division that can feed the pro side of things. And so a team, just as you have said, in the Northern California area, they might come do 2 races a year with us, but there could be 5 or 6 races for them on a local regional club racing basis. And there the economics will work for them. And these are very popular track day cars as well. So it's just, you know, being smart technically with a rules package that is not extreme. And in the TA2, you just look at it and say, really, $130,000 race car that competes for a year at kind of the Mazda MX-5 Cup price point, and you get to race NASCAR kids and Indy 500 Rookies of the Year. I mean, there's nothing in racing even remotely close to that. Then the production side of things have evolved, ebbs and flows of what we're trying to do, but we're trying to match up to FIA GT4 and GT3 relative to our 3 classes, and really mostly trying to find a home for cars that have been homologated out of the current day IMSA or current day SRO, and give those teams there an opportunity to race them here, or find a new buyer for the, you know, secondhand buyer that's going to take it and still have a lot of life left in that race car. And that's what our production classes are more or less trying to achieve.
Talk about that fine acquisition from NASCAR as well on the officiating side. Yet again, another move, John, where you say we're building this thing correctly and growing it in the right way that should give confidence to all your competitors.
Yeah, first, I would say that Dorsey Schrader has done a great job for us in the past, and he's still an ambassador of Trans Am. And, you know, but the opportunity to get a operator like David Hoots, who has done over 1,000 NASCAR races at the highest level, It was a great opportunity for us to be able to do something that he could commit as an exclusive, or not necessarily exclusive, but that he could do all of our races. Dorsey had commitments with HSR. There were races that he, felt that he had been doing for HSR for years, if not decades, and he didn't want to change some of those arrangements around where Trans Am was clearly the #1 priority. So for us in growing, it meant that we needed to have somebody that made Trans Am their #1 commitment. And with David, you're just getting a guy that is just so buttoned down. He, in talking to him for 3 or 4 months before our first race, the level of questions that he was asking about our, how we operated were just questions that I have never heard before out of any chief steward that I've been involved with since 1984. And it gave me a level of comfort that he was going to be the right guy. And there may be some races that come along that are challenging, but so far, I think even our online viewers have noticed a difference in how the race is managed from race control. There's just little subtle things as a viewer that you go, oh, well, that's a little different. So we're very happy with that.
Let's close on 2 topics of interest. Don't know whether you want to take them, John, or Tony. You guys can split them up. Let's come back to TA2. Again, all pivoting towards what's happening here in the West Coast with Trans Am coming to Thrill this weekend. Move a little bit further west, more in the Australia level. There's some interest in TA2 and whatnot being heard down under. Tell me about the desire to expand what y'all are doing into definitely different markets.
Yeah, and that one probably is best for me, in that we had started, I'd say 6, 7 months ago. Well, actually, that's not even correct because of COVID. I lose a lot of sight of where we are with the 6 months that just disappeared. But about a year and some ago, the Australian Racing Group, which is the recognized #1 sanctioning body for sports car racing in Australia, said, we want to do a proper licensing agreement with your company, develop our brand on your brand, follow your rules package as much as we can. Are you interested? Well, of course we were, and that's how it started. They had a COVID response very similar to what we did last year, in that they shut down travel and races inside of Australia. So they only had 1 race last year. They've come back this year in a much healthier place. They've got something like 20 cars on the grid, TA2 cars on the grid. And, it's just a great success story that ultimately we gave them the rights to expand over to New Zealand. So at some point there should be Trans Am in New Zealand as well. So that's something that we're proud of, that the TA2 has a global footprint now.
Brilliant. Let's finish on a topic that intrigues me. I've heard rumor of it. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it. Long before my beard turned gray, back in 1988, a young, thinner Marshall Pruett was thrilled to watch Audi make their debut in Trans Am and bring technology with all-wheel drive, small displacement turbo, just revolutionized interest in Trans Am. Keep hearing that there could be some increasing technology that is under consideration for Trans Am in the future. Is that anything you guys can talk about here as you try and plan for the future?
One little piece I'll take, and then I'm throwing that hot potato over to Tony. We are doing some development of an 18-inch tire and wheel for the Trans Am class, which will bring Trans Am back to its proper place of being the fastest sports cars in North America. That testing program is being done by Parella with Chris Dyson. And we will see in probably July, August, September, the final pieces of that development done, where 2022 would be the launch of 18-inch tires and wheels for the Trans Am class only. We're not going to do that in TA2. But hey, Tony, what about that rumor?
Yeah, that it's something about extra horsepower, maybe, but not from an internal combustion engine. That's the hot rumor on the street.
Yeah, I think it's no secret that we're in the middle of a technology shift in the entire automotive industry, let's face it. And we would be asleep at the wheel if we didn't at least consider how does that enter into our strategy going forward. It's a little bit premature to talk specifics, but I will tell you we are entertaining an electric, at least for now, exhibition class within Trans Am. The ultimate goal, if you look at Trans Am's history, in my perspective, when I was a young kid at 10 years old in 1969, seeing as sold on the showroom floor, slightly modified with a roll cage racing, taking a production car and turning it into a race car. I would really like to see that happen again across several manufacturers. And I think if in fact we could do it with electric cars, I think it would bring real value to the OEMs. If you think about it today, with all this change from gas combustion to hybrids to total electric, racing has always provided a platform for stress-related R&D. There's no better stress-related R&D than racing. And I think as electric becomes part of our everyday life across the board, I think we have an opportunity where we race, our demographic and our paddock, to at least consider having an electric class for Trans Am. So as the world evolves, I think Trans Am will evolve too. That's not to say that we're doing away with our existing infrastructure. We kind of like making some noise, that's for sure. But I think there's a need for racing and I think there's a need for the technology to evolve. I mean, it's not unlike the turn of the century when we went from horse and buggy to gas combustion and the role the Indy 500 played to really proving out and validating that the gas engine was here to stay. I don't think electric is not here to stay. It's going to be here. And I think we can play a role in that, especially with where we race, our footprint, our demographic, and our infrastructure. The way we race our 100-mile races, I don't think that's possible today with an electric car to run flat out 100 miles. But I think we can build towards that level of endurance and where a battery can do it. It's just very early in the stage. Several of the OEMs have planted a flag that they're going to be total electric by X date. And we think we can help them with that.
Tony Parella, John Clagett. Go ahead, John.
It gives us a new marketing tagline: the past, the present, and the future. Come see it all in one weekend.
Look at that. Andy handles marketing. I tell you what, guys. Thanks so much for joining us here. Trans Am, West Coast, Sonoma Raceway, Laguna Seca. I mean, if you could come up with a time machine where we could go back, John, as you mentioned, and watch the amazing battles from the late 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you name it, You're coming to one of Trans Am's spiritual homes here in California. So can't wait for that. And Francisque, thanks again for hosting us here on this e-Partrade and Racer collaboration.
You are very welcome, Marshall. A big thank you, Tony and John, for joining us today. The webinar has been recorded. It will be available later on the e-Portrait platform, as well as on our YouTube channel, as well as Racer. We will be back next Wednesday. We're going back to tech. We're going to be talking about understanding modern era for fuel delivery system with the DAM-based race fuel system. So again, thank you very, very much for joining us. Have a terrific race this weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
For having us, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.